Welcome to The Ghost of Real Estate. I'm your host, Tim Galligan. And on this episode, episode number 13, we're with very special guest, Megan Shergill of Personal Touch. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, of course.
Nice. So you want to start off, tell us a bit about yourself, how you got involved with Personal Touch.
Sure. So beyond just being a guest on your podcast today, I'm the Director of Business Development for Personal Touch Home Care, which is a licensed home care agency servicing clients and families in New York State. So what that entails is helping families understand the different home care options and getting them enrolled into home care because there are so many different options.
Right.
And how I actually got involved in that initially was I worked direct care with children with special needs for about 10 years. And you're probably looking at me thinking, 10 years, how old was this person when she first started working with children? What was she, 8? But I started actually working when I was 13 with children with special needs, volunteering at Mill Neck School for the Deaf.
That's awesome.
And then working at a summer program for children with special needs. It was an arts and music program during the summer season. And doing that, I got very heavily involved into the autism community. And then I started working direct care as a community rehabilitation specialist, teaching them things like ABA, assisting with occupational therapy, and trying to get them more independent in their goals of activities of daily living.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. So doing that, I was helping a number of families, but I really saw more potential for myself, thinking I could help a grander scope of people if I could reach more people rather than just the one-on-one direct care, because my knowledge base became so grand, so to speak. So then I was offered an opportunity to actually get involved into home care, and then that was, allowed me to pivot into assisting families with special needs, the disabled population, and the geriatric population, and that is just my passion.
Awesome. So you were doing all three of those at the same time, kind of like a broad scope of coverage for them.
Yes, and even beyond that, I used to work for an organization called the DEI, Development for Disabled Individuals, and it was a special needs facility which housed these individuals because they weren't right to stay at home. So instead, they lived at a residential facility. So while also providing community rehabilitation for individuals living in their homes, I worked at this special needs facility, working like overnight shifts, and then also a 9-to-5 at the home care agency. And then I was able to join Personal Touch Home Care. And in this Director of Business Development role, I get to help prepare families for those very important nursing assessments prior to being approved for home care services. And then when they're approving them for a certain amount of hours for home care and helping them prepare for that nursing assessment makes these families more knowledgeable and better informed to say things the right way to best tell their loved ones' stories. Because as you know, you really have that one shot, that one opportunity to tell your loved one's story for the nurse to really understand the full picture.
Right. So tell us a bit more about your role. I mean, you are like the master networker.
Oh, thank you. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Megan Shergill.
Little
drop, click and subscribe. But so what I do is I network with individuals like yourself. That's how you and I met at a Starbucks, right? And what we did was, what I do is I like to connect with people so that, because I know when they're speaking to me for home care services, there's already this heightened level of urgency because when you go down the route of needing home care, you're almost always past the point of needing home care. You needed it like yesterday. And beyond that, you probably already need also assistance with other facets of elder care or special needs. Maybe you need an attorney, or maybe you need assistance with a pooled income trust, or maybe you need assistance with like trusts and wills. There's so many other things that people are already starting to think about when they're enrolling into home care.
So you got everything coming at you.
So I literally have this industry professional database in my system. So based on territory, because my territory is so large, I oversee Long Island, the 5 boroughs of New York City, and Westchester County. So depending on where the family lives,
that's crazy,
and what stage of the process they're in regards to getting enrolled into home care, I can really filter and sort to best connect them to the industry professionals that I know.
Awesome. So from a home care specific, so you're obviously giving out referrals and connecting them to people who can help them in specific regard. But in regards to home care specific, what does Personal Touch and yourself offer? How does it work, and how do you kind of get it started once you're approved? Yeah.
So there's so many home care agencies. Do you know what the last running number of home care agencies was in New York State alone?
Can I guess?
Yeah.
I have no idea, but I'm going to guess there are 619.
They actually estimate over 800
Wow.
plus.
All right, I was close.
That's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
What I always
You
say,
said guess high.
right? And you tried, right? So what I always say is, imagine trying to do your research. Say you wanted to install a fence in your backyard, and you
Right.
went and you go on Yelp and you search, fence in Suffolk County if you live in Suffolk County. Imagine having 800 choices.
It's overwhelming.
How would you even choose?
I would just go to the first 2 that I saw on Google.
Right, and that's not even necessarily correct, because you want someone who is perhaps
Right.
licensed to do this,
Right.
not just like a mom and pop agency building a business in their basement,
Right.
which is super sketch, right? And there's a lot of them in New York State.
Oh,
So,
really?
oh my gosh, yeah, like a lot of super sketchy organizations that have just established themselves maybe within the last 5 years, and they're not licensed.
Not licensed?
So are you familiar with what a licensed home care agency is as opposed to a non-licensed?
No, let's go into it.
Sure. So a licensed home care agency means that they had to apply with New York State to be licensed. And what that means is they literally have a certificate to provide services in different territories, so maybe different counties. And what that means is they are on the radar, so to speak, of New York State Department of Health, which is the best thing possible.
Right, of
Because
course.
if you're a family member looking for care for your loved one, you want New York State to be doing those checks and balances and to be auditing them, right, properly, to make sure that they're doing things above
Right.
bar, so to speak, doing things the right way. Whereas these other agencies who are not licensed do things a little bit sketch sometimes. So
Is it legal to be unlicensed and do it?
So you can do it. However, if you're applying for Medicaid, so say you're a client who's paying for home care services privately.
Right.
If down the line you want to apply for Medicaid and then get reimbursed for the services that you have been paying for privately, you have to enroll into a licensed home care agency.
Got it.
So imagine if you weren't well versed in home care and you weren't fluent, you didn't understand the differences,
Right.
and you were using a non-licensed home care agency and then expecting to get reimbursed.
And you can't.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
yes.
that's a nightmare.
So I would say
Wow.
do your research, use a licensed home care agency like Personal Touch. And we've been in business since 1974 with over 47 years of experience.
Wow.
And we're very well versed in home care. There's so many different options, which I bet you didn't even really know in regards to home care. So there's traditional home care, in which an individual, let's say we were looking for home care services for you, okay? Traditional home care. If you needed home care services, I could outsource and go to a home care agency like Personal Touch, tell them about yourself and your unique needs, and then we would send an individual, a certified licensed caregiver, a personal care attendant, or a home health aide, to go out to your home to provide you the services that you need, these
Right.
activities of daily living. And I always describe activities of daily living to be something like, think about what you do when you get up in the morning. You get up, you make your bed, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you get dressed, you groom, maybe you do your hair or your makeup, depending on who you are.
Me.
Exactly. So those are all activities of daily living, which go even beyond that: companionship, like taking a walk, errands,
Right.
meal preparation, reminding to take medication. These are all activities of daily living. So in the traditional home care route, when the agency sends a caregiver, that's like hands off, great for you. There's no stress involved, because if God forbid that caregiver calls out, we just send somebody else who is licensed, trained, and supervised by a nurse.
How many people are on staff with Personal Touch?
I love that you asked that question. Over 12,000
That's
currently.
crazy.
Yeah. And it's
Wow.
great because we actually provide free training for caregivers to become certified as a
wow.
PCA
Okay.
or home health aide. And so I always say, this is really a great opportunity for me to tell people, if you have a 9-to-5 job right now, living in New York State, we know a lot of people need like a side hustle, like a
Right.
side supplemental income.
Yeah.
Consider being a caregiver, because you could work after business hours, on the weekends,
Interesting.
part-time or per diem. You could get enrolled and certified with our agency as a PCA and do this during spring break, during a holiday break,
Right.
and make a chunk load of money in a short period of time. And people love that.
So if someone calls, so how exactly on a business standpoint for Personal Touch does it work? I mean, this is an overwhelming market.
Yeah.
You have so many people who need these services. You have 12,000 caregivers. So say my household calls and they say, who are they calling? Are they calling a main number? They're calling you directly.
They should call me. Yes, that way they don't get lost in kind of like the gears of motion type
Right.
of thing. They call me, and if I could plug myself right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So
yeah.
my direct number is 631-406-3590, and that's my direct line. And I always say, you can call me after business hours. I actually encourage it. Call me on the weekends,
Right.
because I always say there's always like a sense of urgency for some reason at 5 p.m. on a Friday, you know, and that's when people don't seem to answer their phones. So that's a great time for you to call me, and you know, despite it irking my husband sometimes, I'm going to answer because what makes me different from other organizations is I'm accessible, and that's the difference. Because there's not much different from my organization other than the high quality of care than another home care agency. So if the only thing I can do differently is just be extremely accessible, that's everything. Right?
So now you're placing, so then someone calls you.
So someone calls me, and what I do is a very thorough intake process. So if you were the client calling me looking for home care services, I would find out at what stage of the process you're in and what home care option is right for you based on your unique needs. So there's that traditional home care route, which I always say is like very hands-off, easy peasy. Then there's CDPAP. Have you heard of CDPAP before?
I have not.
So it's an acronym, and home care is just filled with tons of acronyms. It stands for the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. And this is a program that was developed back in the 80s, I believe, from a group of individuals who sat around a kitchen table who were physically disabled but not mentally disabled. And their thought process was, why do we have an agency being the decision makers in our home care services? They wanted to be more autonomous in their home care services. So they said, let's develop a program, the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program, in which we are the bosses. So what CDPAP is rather than traditional home care where the agency sends the caregiver, you as the client handpick someone that you know, love, and trust to be your caregiver, but then you as the boss, you are responsible for hiring, interviewing the caregiver, scheduling them, training and supervising. So some people love this. I say the people who love this are those helicopter families that already are like super hyper involved in their home care services. But some people who do not love CDPAP are the people who are already overwhelmed. Because if your caregiver calls out in CDPAP, you have to have somebody already enrolled backup. To work for you. Right? So there's sometimes a little bit of stress involved. And a lot of times families ask me, well, you know, when is the nurse coming out to train the caregiver? The nurse will never be coming out because it's the CDPAP program. The consumer, the client, trains the caregiver.
Got it.
So think about it this way. So many times we'll send out our nurse in traditional home care to orient the caregiver to a new client, like on the first day of services. And perhaps you have like a Hoyer lift, right? So the nurse is orienting the caregiver, you know, this is how you use the Hoyer lift for Mrs. Smith. Picture Mrs. Smith's daughter saying, no, it's better if she does it this way. And like she teaches the nurse or the caregiver. That's the right person for CDPAP. Like where the family or the client can better kind of orient and guide and supervise the caregiver.
Okay. Oh, got it. Okay, so they're with the caregiver. Understood.
Correct.
Okay.
So they're the ones who are responsible for literally training the caregiver with every facet of the individual's needs.
I bet the caregivers don't like CDPAP.
Actually, they love it because in CDPAP, there's only a few exclusions of who can't be the caregiver, which makes sense, right?
Got it.
It has to be somebody over the age of 18. Right, makes sense. They have to be obviously eligible to work in the United States. They have to have their papers. They cannot be the individual's spouse because there's like a conflict of interest. And if, so the special needs population loves CDPAP because if the client is 21 years of age or older, the parent can be the caregiver for their adult child. So how beautiful is that?
Yeah,
where
that makes
this kind of like selfless and like non-rewarding job of being the caregiver already for your special needs child for years with like no reward, no compensation. By the time they turn 21, the parent can be the caregiver, and that's why people in the special needs community love CDPAP.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're going to go back now to the different home care options, right?
Yes.
Traditional home care, which we talked about, CDPAP, the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. Then there's the self-pay, private pay option. So that's for people who don't have Medicare or Medicaid or just choose to pay privately for whatever reason. And I encourage everyone to always do their due diligence when looking up home care agencies, like searching for a fencing company on Yelp. Instead, go to Google Business and look up the reviews on Google Business because you can't pay for those reviews. Those are reviews, real reviews from employees and real clients and families. So I encourage you go to our Google Business account. If you look up Personal Touch Home Care, type in Long Island City, that's our main office. We have over 100 5-star reviews from employees and clients. And that I think speaks volumes because it's the truth coming from the community.
Right. So CDPAP, traditional.
Private pay.
Right.
And then the last one is, have you ever heard of CHA services, CHHA? I'm so glad that we met today. So CHA services is Certified Home Health Agency. So that's where somebody has Medicare and needs some type of skilled nursing service like occupational therapy, physical therapy, wound care, or an RN assessment, or short-term home care hours. So say you are being discharged from the hospital. Perhaps you just need short-term home care hours post-discharge with physical therapy for whatever reason. I could then, in conversation with you, rather than tell you to pay privately or apply for Medicaid for long-term care, I can tell you instead, you just need short-term, let's get you enrolled into our CHA services so that Medicare will compensate it for an episode, which is typically like 4 to 6 weeks, maybe Monday through Friday, 3 to 4 hours a day, which is really all you needed anyway.
Right. And then Medicaid would cover all services
so
except
the traditional home care is Medicaid funded.
Okay.
The CDPAP is also Medicaid funded. Self-pay is self-pay.
Right.
And CHA services is Medicaid and Medicare.
Got it. Okay. So now someone calls, they call you, and you answer the phone. You say, okay, great. You do the intake, and then what happens? Services just start?
No, so we do the intake, and then I always say I endearingly call our coordination team our matchmakers because they are the ones matching the clients to our caregivers because it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
If you have needs of dementia or Alzheimer's or oxygen needs or diabetes, we need to find someone who has that type of experience. Besides everyone having to be certified and licensed as a PCA or home health aide, I still want someone who has some relevant experience working with your specific needs.
Right.
So our coordination team finds and handpicks the right person, and once we identify that caregiver, then you and I agree on a start date. We get the authorization from your insurance plan if you have one, and then services begin.
So do they meet the caretaker prior?
So that's a great question. So a lot of people ask for that, but we actually don't do that because it's actually at the deterrent of the caregiver, because the caregivers are caregivers. They are not public speakers. They're not directors of business development. So they're not always the great at interviewing. And I always say, it's almost like you're doing them a disservice if you interview them prior and then you just say, no, I don't want them.
Got it.
I'd rather the family and the client see the caregiver in the environment, the first day of services, where they're rolling up their sleeves, they're getting to it.
Doing what they do.
Exactly. And then that way the family can be very impressed because there are things I don't excel in, and it wouldn't be right to interview me on those certain things rather than just seeing me in my element, so to speak.
Now, is there, for each thing that could be, is there different levels of pricing?
Oh yeah, and I encourage families to do their due diligence, do your research. There's so many agencies, like we discussed, to choose from. And first, make sure they're licensed. They do things above board. We have among the lowest private pay rates in home care. Last I did my research. So I tell everyone, do your research, shop around, and then if you'd like, circle back with me and we can get services started for you, because I'm not in the business of making people bankrupt. It's not fair to them. If we can get them services on a budget, that's the best case scenario.
Got it. Now, Personal Touch is national company?
So I wish. No, we're in, I believe, 7 states. But right now, I only oversee the downstate area of New York State, Long Island, the 5 boroughs of New York City, and Westchester.
Is there plans for expansion?
Oh, I'm sure down the line. Yeah,
nice.
if it makes sense, right?
Right.
Yeah,
for sure. And then what? So you're taking them on. So what's your goal? Is obviously to grow
the business.
Grow the business.
We're always trying to bring on more caregivers, bring on more clients, so that people ideally can live and age at home. Because I think at the end of the day, that's really where people want to be, rather than like an assisted living or a nursing home. They want to be literally within their community, and that's why it's called community Medicaid.
Right. Okay, so that's the community Medicaid versus traditional Medicaid. That would be for nursing home or for assisted living.
Correct.
Awesome. All right. If anyone wants to reach you, what's the best way to reach you? I know you dropped
that
few
phone
on
number I got
show.
you again, though. It's 631-406-3590, and then my email address, I'll just spell it out. It's M as in my first name, Megan, and then my last name, Shergill, SHERGILL, at P as in Peter, T as in Thomas, homecare.com.
Awesome. Megan, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks
I appreciate
so much, Tim. Appreciate it.
Awesome.